to another video. Today we're going to be working with full moon energy as well as the rose, which was a topic of my last video. Roses coming up in a lot of the spiritual work that I've been doing this past month. All things roses. So we are going to dive a little bit more into roses with our healing story, the Rose of Santo Domingo. I'm really excited to share that with you. Then we'll draw a few oracle cards. I've got a few cards for us already that came up from the Twin Hearts deck. These are all my decks. And then we'll be drawing from Bubble Bubble just to see if there's anything else that the cards want to share about this. So we're going to let the story kind of reveal the topic of whatever we're going to talk about today, kind of letting the guides step in and help me out with whatever messages I feel like folks most need to hear. So before we do that, we're going to light this big kahuna candle. So again, talking about roses, I was just kind of at my local shop and I wasn't even looking for candles. I just happened to be looking at what they had there. And I looked down towards the floor and this giant candle was there. Now this is a Virgen de Guadalupe candle, which is the Virgin of Guadalupe, which to me is just an aspect of Mother Mary. And yeah, Mother Mary just, I think someone once told me, like, when you smell roses, Mother Mary's around. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. But Mother Mary and the Sisters of the Rose have all been around in my energy field of late. And it was so good because this candle has, it's got the typical like look of the Virgin of Guadalupe. It's got like a lot of roses, but it's also a rose scented candle and it smells really good. So we are going to light this Mama Jamma. Now this particular candle, when we light it, has to burn at least 3 hours to get a really good burn on the candle. So let's read the little invocation that's on the back of it, for lack of a better word. And I say 3 hours only because it's so big, and to get a really good burn so that it doesn't tunnel down, I should burn like an hour for every inch of diameter of the candle. But it says, Prayer to Our Lady of Guadalupe. Our Lady of Guadalupe, mystic rose, who helps those that implore on to you in their hour of need, you that are mother of the true God, intercede before your Son the grace I need to guard the faith, sweet hope among the bitterness of life, warm charity and precious gift of final perseverance. And then it says, ask for the desired grace and pray a Holy Mary, Amen, which is more of like a Catholic kind of thing. But look into this candle, and if there is any prayer or wish or whatever that you have been thinking of or intention, since this is the full moon and things are being revealed, you may have new intentions. I am recording this at the full moon in Pisces 2021, but this can be any time you want to take advantage of full moon energy. You can set your intention into the flame of this candle, or you can also choose to release anything that you want to release at this time, which the full moon is also about releasing things typically. You can release that into the candle. It's so big I can barely hold it. Okay, so we are going to let that burn. I'm going to let that burn at least 3 hours. And what I have found is I lit it once yesterday, and within the 3 hours that I lit it and just kind of like invited in the energy of the rose and Mother Mary, I did have some profound understandings and things come up for me during the 3 hours that it was burning. So watch out, take a look at what might be happening for you within the 3 hours of watching this video. If there's anything, coming to light, any new ideas or healing or anything coming up for you because we are inviting that in as part of this. So the next thing I want to do is read the energy story that was channeled for this time period or whenever you're listening to this. Now, if you're familiar with any of my stories, even if you're not, if you are, if you're not, they're all channeled, meaning I just stream of consciousness, bring the stories in. So this is the Rose of Santo Domingo. This is our story that was channeled in for this month. So I want you to just sit back and relax and choose how you want to play with this story. You may want to just, take it as a story, or you may want to invite in any other meanings or things as it pertains to you and any current situation going on in your world right now. So the Rose of Santo Domingo, Chapter 1, Rosalie. As the flower bloomed, Rosalie could not contain her excitement. The first rose of Santo Domingo. She had cross-pollinated 2 heirloom roses to obtain the lavender bloom with gilded edges. The smell of baby's breath and bubble gum exuded from its pink center. Rosalie had taken that gardening class long ago and had been told that her green thumb was a useful thing for attracting a soulmate. What old Mrs. Delancey could have meant by that, she wasn't sure. Rosalie did, however, have a date tonight with someone from her gardening group. He was new to the area and had, for some strange reason, joined the group Kitchen Witchery, How to Grow a Mugwort Without Direct Sunlight class. Rosalie had curiously created the class after several friends and followers had told her the plant had become increasingly hard to find. And now, with summer's end, she knew that in order for the mugwort to germinate, it must be kept indoors. But she couldn't think about mugwort right now. She had to get ready for her date. She was to meet Calvin O'Hanrahan at the Drunken Spoon Tavern for drinks, and she was running late. Rosalie gently placed the potted Rose of Santo Domingo in the little indoor greenhouse she had made in the spare room. She had heard strange goings-on coming from the room late at night, so she carefully checked the window. It was locked as she knew it would be. Could flowers have fairies, she wondered, or even guardian angels? She shushed her ever-active magical mind to get ready for her date, and 20 minutes later was heading out the door to the Drunken Spoon. What she didn't realize was that the door to the spare bedroom where the little greenhouse lived had been left open. Catamancy, Rosalie's tabby, was quite interested in what went on in the forbidden zone of that room, for he was always shushed away when he got too close to the door. But now freedom reigned, and he carefully slipped inside. He could see a light coming from a shaded area where there were many plants and flowers. And then he saw something shiny from the corner of his eye. It dazzled his vision and beckoned him to the corner of the room. He padded lightly over to the shiny space, and in doing so happened upon the little corner garden. The little corner garden was richly decorated with all manner of fallen petals and leaves, baubles and bits, and carefully selected earrings and shiny things from around the house. Catamancy was not surprised to see the fairy and the house elf cajoling each other around a small fire lit only by a magical spell. The small corner of the room awash with light. He didn't speak any mortal language, and least of all fairy speak, which could be quite shrill at times, but he could communicate with his mind, and in doing so, he made the fast acquaintance of Molly McBottoms and Greer the house elf. Greer had been in the home ever since his last master had left him and never returned. Greer had been heartbroken and vowed never to devote his services to a mortal being again. Molly McBottoms had flown inside one day when the spare bedroom window had been left open, and then finding this bedroom oasis to her liking, had decided to stay. She periodically went outdoors to forage in the backyard, but the neighbor's dog had scared her so badly one day, she decided to become an indoor fae. Molly had become increasingly infatuated with the Rose of Santo Domingo, and would often fly the long distance up to the top of the greenhouse table to perch on its baby breath and bubblegum scented petals. Now, unbeknownst to Molly, Greer, Catamancy, and even Rosalie, the Rose of Santo Domingo had a magical power. The power had been gifted to the flower by the angels, and it had only one purpose. The magical scent, combined with the sight of the petals and neon green leaves, could bring in romantic love to anyone that touched it, as long as romance was the intention in the heart of the one who held it. The Rose of Santo Domingo considered this a very important role, and was quite tired of sitting in this spare bedroom under a torchlight. It needed to get out there and spread its joy with more people. It knew that Rosalie thought she didn't need a love, and so its intoxicating power had not worked on her. But the flower angels, Molly McBottoms, and even sad Greer, knew that Rosalie deserved true love. And so a plan was formed between the little group to get the Rose of Santo Domingo out to the real world. Take a deep breath. Chapter 2, Calvin. Calvin O'Hanrahan was not going to let up. His friend Riley had been telling him for quite some time now that women did not like the scent of pine aftershave lotion. Calvin was certain this was not true and had tried unsuccessfully to test this on several of the women in the gardening group. He had sat several seats away from Lily, and when she had looked around at the seats in the area, she had fixated her gaze on him and then moved several more seats away. She had even pulled a small lace handkerchief from her purse and placed it delicately against her nose. And then Mrs. Delancey had entered the room, took one whiff, and went straight to opening the windows closest to Calvin. So maybe Riley was right. But why then had his mom told him many times that pine was an intoxicating scent? What Calvin couldn't know was that Mrs. O'Hanrahan was brought up in the witch mountains of County Cork, and pine was a very important scent to the witch mages there. They used pine in everything, and it was surmised that the scent kept mortal folks far away. This allowed the witch mages to work their magic uninterrupted. Mrs. O'Hanrahan's mother had worked for a particularly piney witch, Greenhilda, who had imparted the magic of pine scent as a sacred tool on the house staff, of which elder Mrs. O'Hanrahan managed. So pine was deeply ingrained in Calvin's memory, but maybe it was time to say goodbye to pine. It didn't mean he was disrespectful. It just meant he would have much better luck in the lady department. Calvin had much to do before his outing with Rosalie, for Calvin had for some time been wishing for a special someone. And he quite liked Rosalie, although she had prior to this engagement never given him a second glance. Maybe it was the pine. He picked up a trash bin and started about the house, throwing away all remnants of anything related to pine-scentedness. He had been quite surprised when on a whim he had been clearly guided to approach Rosalie after class one day. She had on a pink frock that beguiled him in a certain way, and her hair had looked like spun golden sugar that day. He wanted to take her to the Drunken Spoon Tavern, a little pub that's come up in our stories before, and is favored by the locals. He had never been, but Riley said it was a very good place for dinner and dancing. So Calvin had taken him up on the recommendation and was quite surprised when Rosalie had accepted the invitation. He didn't care if she liked him or not. He was just excited to be going somewhere again, and with a beautiful girl who he knew loved plants like he did. Calvin buttoned up his linen shirt and topped that with a suede vest. His cashmere slacks, in a dubious tan, were offset by the red of his shoulder-length hair. He placed the tam o' shanter on and tilted it just so. His mum had procured this beauty on her last trip to the Scottish Isles. He was ready, but before he could head out the back door, the front doorbell chimed 3 times. He put down his keys and the rose he had put in a plastic dome cover and headed to the front room. He opened the door, but there was no one there. He looked up and down the street, but there was nobody. At that moment, Greer slipped inside, followed by Molly, as Catamancy looked on from the front shrub. There was work to be done inside, and no time to waste. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. I never know what's going to come out here. Chapter 3, The Rose Dome. Catamancy was the lookout, although he wasn't really sure what he was looking out for. He had done his duty in leading the group to Calvin's place. After all, his fine sense of direction and his penchant for smelling out anything having to do with Rosalie had made it easy for him to find Calvin's house. He had taken the two on a short jaunt through the back alleys of the small town, and now they had arrived. Catamancy could smell the strong scent of pine coming from the bins in the alley and recognized this as a scent that always seemed to permeate the air when Rosalie would return from her gardening class. Now you may think, reader, that pine was overpowering everything around young Calvin, but he was quite unaware of how much it had been ingrained in him over time, so much so that one might begin to wonder if he wasn't taking on the demeanor and mannerisms of the pine elves who lived out in the little woods behind his home. Deep Pine Green, as the locals called it, was home to all manner of nature elementals, and pine elves were no exception. They lived deep in the wood and called the tall conifer trees home. This space was the most magical of the Deep Pine Green, and when any local witch or wizard wanted to work a particularly magical spell, they would go to the grove in these woods. Catamancy was pulled towards the wooded area by the sound of very sprightly music. He could see a magical light emanating from the Deep Pine Green, and he must leave his post at Calvin's door to find out more. He padded lightly around and into the conifers and towards the mystical light. Meanwhile, back inside Calvin's kitchen, Molly was working her own fairy magic. She had brought a petal of the Rose of Santo Domingo. She had very carefully flew up to the greenhouse table at Rosalie's and, with the flower's permission of course, plucked a very beguiling petal from the center. And now she was, with Greer's help, lifting the plastic dome off the very pungent, but nonetheless beautiful, tansy rose. The tansy always looked pretty alluring, with its orange and burnt red petals. But this couple didn't need a rose that was clearly meant for seduction. This couple needed the Rose of Santo Domingo, a bloom that was here to only bring deep and unending love and affection, the kind of love one dreams about in a fairy tale. Greer carefully removed the tansy rose from its plastic dome, ensuring he didn't destroy any of its petals. He would be taking this rose back to the greenhouse for another time. Molly flew up to the plastic dome and removed the single bud of the Rose of Santo Domingo from her pouch. She said a prayer and uttered some fairy speak that was so shrill no mortal ear could have heard it. At that uttering, the single petal of the Rose of Santo Domingo transformed into a full-fledged flower, and smelling its baby's breath and cotton candy scent, and satisfied with her work, Molly motioned for Greer to cover the flower with the plastic dome. It would be quite safe inside until it reached its destination in Rosalie's hand, and with the motion of her small hand, Molly covered the rose with a glamour so Calvin would not notice the switch. He would, of course, be able to feel its magical presence as it worked its love on the two. Molly and Greer made their way back to the front door and were surprised to find it still open. Calvin had gone outside to look up and down the street and had gotten caught in a conversation with Sigrid McMathers. Sigrid had her eye on Calvin from the moment he had moved into the two-story gingerbread-style cottage on Deep Pine Grove Way. But Sigrid, being a solitary witch, had found it difficult to make her feelings known to Calvin. But she had seen him from her drawing-room window and noticed he looked quite dapper, and feeling the need for human company, had appeared to wander outside at just the perfect moment as Calvin had passed in front of her home. "Oh, Calvin, you look so dapper tonight," she blushed in the dusky night air. "Not that I was particularly looking at you all that much," she said, putting her head down to look at him in a kind of sideways glance. "You look very pretty tonight, Sigrid," Calvin said, politely understating her shyness. Politely understanding her shyness. "By the by, did you see anyone around here?" "Can't say that I have," Sigrid said, looking around herself now. Those darn schoolboys could have been hanging around again. They liked to take her apples from the secret trees behind her cottage, the apples having been rumored to allow anyone to remember anything they had just read with astounding clarity. The boys thinking the magical apples could help improve their school test scores. As Calvin and Sigrid were conversing, and Molly and Greer were searching for catamancy, a shriek cat call went up from the deep green wood as the tabby came bounding through the thick tree line. Turns out that deep pine elves did not like the looks of cats, who were bent on learning their secrets. The elves had run off the large cat with a burst of elven magic from a firetail plant, singeing the fur on the well-meaning cat's tail. Catamancy burst out into the quaint scene, and seeing the cat with a fire-bright tail singed with magic, Sigrid forgot all about the stolen apples, and Calvin realized he was going to be late for his date. "Good night, Sigrid. I'm running late for an important engagement," he said in a kind of bow that one makes to signal thanks. At least, that's what they did at the Royal China Garden restaurant after they delivered his mushu pork, Calvin recalled. "Good night," Sigrid said, having had enough human contact for now. Oh, God, I know how she feels. She made her way back to her cottage and the cauldron of beetle soup she was making for the new moon. With the group of three reunited, and Catamancy none the worse for wear, saved a singed tail and his pride being a little hurt, the three, again three, made their way back to Rosalie's, happy for a job well done. The rest was now up to the Rose of Santo Domingo. Could it work its magic and bring two lonely souls together? Could one single rose really have all that profound an effect? Could it alter history? Or was history already altered, and the rose was simply there to enjoy in the magic? Join us at the full moon in Pisces to reveal the rest of the story, which the story was written a while back, and I could never write the last chapter until last night. But those are some questions to think about. The Rose of Santo Domingo. Could it work its magic and bring, do you believe in magic? So here's how the story unfolds. Chapter 4, how the story unfolds. Calvin decided that everything was fine and excused himself, sure that if he didn't hurry just a little, that quite possibly Rosalie might not be waiting for him. Hint, hint. No, stop. I don't know where this is going. He double and then triple checked his appearance in the little mirror by the door, and satisfied with what he saw, he picked up the enchanted rose dome and headed out the door, intent on making it to the drunken spoon. As Calvin was walking and humming a strange song that had popped into his mind, Rosalie was also humming the same strange song that had suddenly popped into her mind. Could two souls really be connected like that? The story seems to say so. But as Calvin was walking, a strange sense came over him. The little rose of Santo Domingo, glistening in its rose dome, began to emit a frequency. It was more of a feeling that came over the scene. Its magic was starting to take hold, and the rose beamed with anticipation. Calvin made the short distance to the drunken spoon in what seemed like no time at all. Rosalie could feel the air change around her. All thoughts of her work and mundane reality shifted as Calvin approached her at the outside table she had chosen. Her drink was frothy and cooling on the back of her throat, and she wondered why suddenly she felt like she loved everyone. "A rose for a pretty lady," Calvin said, setting down the rose dome and holding out his hand in what felt like an awkward gesture. Rosalie didn't know whether to shake his hand or take his hand. She felt all warm inside as, unbeknownst to her, the beams of love from the Rose of Santo Domingo enveloped the entire scene. Even the waiter who approached the table had sudden feelings of deep love for everyone around him. And such was the magical tale that unfolded between the two as they looked into each other's eyes. But could it be that easy? Could love really unfold that easily? Could a magical bloom really exist? Could a magical bloom really exist that would help two lovers come together? Do you still believe in magic, dear soul? If so, then you already know what happens next. So good. Oh, my stories always make me cry. Okay. So when lots of magical love shows up, I always get tears. Okay. Whew. Do you still believe in magic, dear soul? So I think that's what's happening here is, I don't know, just personally, like there's so much, I just keep saying there's so much. I don't know if you listen to the podcast from a Sunday, but I'm trying not to intertwine those anymore. I'm just trying to do the podcast as podcasts and not put them up on YouTube and vice versa, and not put anything from YouTube up on the podcast. But I don't know, who really cares, right? It's like, if you're listening to this, like, do you really care one way or the other? I don't know. It's totally beside the point. The reason I'm here is to spread magic and love and fun stories and healing. And so for the purposes of this video, I think the big question is, do you still believe in magic, dear soul? Could it be that easy? Could love really unfold that easy? Could a magical bloom really exist that would help two lovers come together? Anything and everything is possible. I think that's the that's the message. That's one of the messages. I think there's a lot of messages in this story. And I used to try to break down all the metaphors, but since everybody's on their own path, their own journey, their own level of understanding, you may just see that as a simple story reading, storytelling, or you can choose to, for your own self, look or listen again to anything that might be standing out to you as messages for you. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is look at the two cards. So these two cards came out this morning. Like I said, this is from Twin Hearts. The colors are important. So like a violet, everything about all my card decks, like everything's important, not just the picture or the words or whatever. So I'm going to read these two cards that came out this morning, see how it pertains to this story. So these are messages for you. Take what resonates, leave anything that doesn't. But the first card is the purple card, or the violet card. And that one is under the topic of Twin Hearts. So it says Twin Hearts. This particular deck, some of the cards are quotes from some of my books that have to do with romance or just love. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic love. It could be soulmate love, friendship love, self-love. It's all part of this particular deck. But the two cards that came out were Karmic Entanglement and Twin Hearts. So let's read the Twin Hearts. So the Twin Hearts card said he wasn't afraid of meeting Larimar. He just couldn't fathom what was supposed to happen after they met. And this was Billy Tavish in Chaga and Chai. So if you're not, and you don't have to be familiar with, like, you could just take that and be like, okay, what does that mean? He wasn't afraid of meeting Larimar. He just couldn't fathom what was supposed to happen after they met. So we could put this to the Rose of Santo Domingo. I think in this case, if we just did that, then it would be like Calvin was going to meet Rosalie, and I don't think he thought too far ahead about like what's going to happen after I give her this rose, what's going to take place, after we meet, because if you get all caught up in that, then he could have very easily talked himself out of even going to meet her in the first place, because it just could have become too overwhelming, or there could have been too many unanswered questions. Like, well, I don't know. Is she going to accept the rose? Is she going to like it? Is she going to like me? Like, ugh, blah. So you're being asked in any type of situation, whether it be romantic love or whether you have to go talk to somebody, just don't get too far ahead of yourself. And in this case, he just couldn't fathom what was supposed to happen after they met. In this case, in this book, well, as with any like magical meeting, which is what's happening here in the Rose of Santo Domingo, it's going to be better than Calvin and Rosalie could even imagine. And I think we'll come back for the next in this series, because it sounds like the Tansy Rose, which is the seduction rose, wants to come out next at some point and do a story. So this is just, don't let the, I keep listening to someone who keeps calling the ego the practical mind, and I don't want to get them confused, but like, don't let the mental body put you in a state of overthinking sometimes. So obviously you have discernment, and all of that still applies, but sometimes you have to lead with the heart, which is what happened in our story. Calvin just led with his heart. The rose surrounded him. It just made him feel really good inside, which is all about new earth living. Like, you feel really good inside. You want to do something, anything. It doesn't have to be finding a partner. And your heart just is like, yes, it feels good. Okay, practical mind. Is there anything that, using my discernment, is there anything that would prevent me or seems like it would be off about this situation? Just quickly check in. Nope, everything seems good. Go for it. Just go for it. Okay, that's kind of what this card is saying. Now, the other one that came out here is quite interesting. It's green. So to me, violet, this is more like crown chakra, like trust the guidance you're getting. If you're guided to go somewhere or contact someone or do something, then just trust that you're being divinely guided. And if it feels good, then go with your heart. Go with your heart speak. This one is green. And this card, I know it's kind of far away and you can't exactly see the card, but this one is Karmic Entanglement. I guess I could get them a little bit closer, but this one is Karmic Entanglement. This one said, it was as if she had been in some strange trance, and this rose on the back of her neck burning into her, had woken her up somehow. Pamela in The Stallion Returns. So this is interesting to me that a rose is coming out again in the cards. This is a very particularly interesting situation. This is a stigmata that appeared on Pamela's neck. This is Pamela Cartwright in the Thunder Rose collection. Again, even if you hadn't read the book and knew nothing about what was going on here, this particular one kind of talks about an awakening. So if you just had the card and you didn't have the book, it was as if she had been in some strange trance, and this rose on the back of her neck burning into her, had woken her up somehow. So this is about, I think, also a heart awakening, which is definitely what happened in this story here. Is Pamela was doing some stuff she knew in her heart should not be doing. She went with some one night stand fling with some guy she met at some vintage antique store, just to kind of make herself feel better, because she was feeling kind of down about herself and her age and all of that. And then, as if by magic in the story, and it did have the person she was with was, I just find this whole thing all ties together. The person she was with was Spanish or Hispanic, and this Virgin de Guadalupe candle is here. And we said it had some religious connotations, and I don't know why this is coming up, we're just rolling with it. And in the story, the rose stigmata just appears on the back of her neck when she's in the middle of her tryst with this person. And it starts burning and she doesn't know what it is. And she goes into the bathroom and she asks him to come in and like tell her what, like look at the back of her neck. And he's also knows that he knows better and knows like he shouldn't be doing what he's doing with her. And he's kind of thinking he's going to get paid for his services. This is karmic entanglement. This is what it says. So he sees the rose stigmata, and because it's a religious kind of superstition for him in the story, immediately he gets scared when he sees it, and he, starts talking in Spanish and kind of freaks out and leaves the scene and just totally leaves like scared. And at the same time, the love between the heart, the green, the love between Pamela and Edgar, her fiance, our medicine man, our shaman medicine man in the story, is so strong that he kind of knows that Pam needs his help, which is what came up in this story too. The Rose of Santo Domingo is kind of like they said, Calvin started humming a song, and unbeknownst to him, at the same time, Rosalie started humming the same song. And they were both kind of wondering, like, where did this come from? And then the spirits of the story even broke in and kind of said, like, can two people really be on that same wavelength? Telepathy and magical connections and all of that. And if you are connected at the heart, like many soul partners or soulmates are, again, it doesn't have to be romantic, but can be, then you may be feeling each other's feelings or hearing each other's thoughts, they're saying, hearing each other's thoughts or singing each other's songs or feeling each other's pain or sorrow or happiness. So just something to think about there. If you are connecting more into the higher realms, if you're opening up more to your own magic and your own psychic senses, very possibly so. You are starting to connect with your loved ones in a more profound way. So I want to draw one more card. This is from Bubble Bubble, and I like to do that. This is a particularly fun deck for this time of year. I'm recording this almost autumn. Right before, the week before the full moon and the autumn equinox. So this is a very autumnal deck. So if you like autumn stuff, like you could use this any time of year. This is Bubble Bubble. I just want to check in and see if there's any other messages that Spirit would like me to convey before we wrap up this magical healing session. Giving me that one. And they're telling me the bottom of the deck. So the first one, so they're saying these are more advice. So the first one is, don't get so caught up. It's easier said than done. Don't get so caught up in what's happening behind the scenes. Don't get so caught up in what's happening around you. So there's a lot of triggering stuff going on right now. A lot of things triggering. A lot of things coming up to invoke or invite in healing. But at the same time, if you're a sensitive soul like me, you can get overly tapped into something that's triggering you, trying to figure it out, trying to wrap your mind around why it's happening. You can keep trying to release it and have trouble letting it go. And so you're being asked to, especially in this situation, which is about this whole finding a soulmate or finding love, or which is kind of the topic of this. It seems like we're going down the romantic love thing, the partnership thing. You can get all caught up in the whens, the hows, the whats, the whys, the wheres. How's it going to happen? And you're too fixated on that in the mental body. We're going back to the mental body again. So I told my mental, I have a situation going on now personally where I'm getting too fixated on what's going on with it. And I keep releasing it to my guides, and then it keeps showing back up in my face, and I keep releasing it, it keeps showing back up again. And it's like a big trigger for me. It may seem like something small. I don't want to talk about it, but it may seem like something small to somebody else, but to me it's like a big deal. And so it just keeps coming and coming, and finally I'm like, this is just becoming all encompassing. I can't take this anymore. And I told my ego, I told my mental body, as the soul, I told my mental body, like, you've got too much time on your hands apparently, and you're going to have to get busy. And you're going to have to find something else to focus on. And so that's where this first card comes in as advice for you guys. This is get creative. So if you feel like you're too fixated on outcomes, what's going on around you, what's going on in the 3D world, what's going to happen in a particular situation, that there's just so many unknowns, then you're being invited to focus your actions elsewhere. Creative work, get creative in the kitchen, get creative around your house, whatever you can do to bring creativity into your space. Then you are being invited to put your focus there on what your heart and what your soul wants to do. While you're doing all this waiting for these, again, magical outcomes that you've invited in, just do something else to kind of take your mind off of that. So get creative is the first one. And then the last one is the cemetery. And it says, what's done is done. Bring yourself back to the present moment. And this is a cemetery with like bats flying around it. What's done is done. Bring yourself back to the present moment. And again, it's the same thing I just talked about. It's like if something's happened that's triggered you, if you're stuck on something that happened in the past that still keeps trying to push itself into your now reality, you've got to try to do the best you can to release it. It's dead. You may have to perform a little ritual to help yourself get rid of these thoughts. I am doing that with this situation I'm talking about. I just am surrounding it with Reiki healing and giving it to my guides. And I asked my guides this morning too, because I keep giving it to them and it keeps coming back up in my face. And it's actually something in my physical location that keeps presenting itself to me. Just when I think I've released it, it keeps showing itself to me over and over and over again. And it's kind of like, well, the law of attraction is, right, the more you focus on something of a particular nature, the more of that you're going to get. It's just the way the law of attraction works. I'm like, but I don't want this thing, and it keeps showing up. And my guides are like, well, then you have to make peace with it. Whatever it is, you just have to make peace with it. You have to embrace it. You have to embrace the situation and just make peace with it. And I said, but it keeps coming at me. And then so what they said is every time you just have to continue to release it. If you 100 times a day say, I release you, I release you, I make peace with you, I make peace with you, I forgive any other parties involved, I forgive myself because I can't seem to let this go. Like they said, as much as it shows up, you just have to continue to let it go and focus on the now. For me, that means, kind of not getting lost in my work per se, but just doing other things to make my day more magical, because that's what helps keep me grounded and keep me in the now, is just doing stuff like that. So it sounds like it's all about staying in the present moment, not looking too far ahead, if we're going to surmise all these cards in this story, knowing that magic is out there working on our behalf, really. And we don't have to focus so much on the outcomes. Just do what makes you happy, whatever that may be. And just know that if you believe that magic is real, if you believe that the universe or God or source or your guides or your higher self or whoever it is that you work with is working on your behalf for your highest outcome, your highest good, your highest timeline and all that, then you should be able to just believe that magic is real, go about your day, relax, and be present with what's in your now reality. So let me just check in with, I have Archangel Metatron here, Archangel Michael. See if there's anything else the guides want to share. Okay. So they're saying that that is all we have to share. So I'm going to end this little fun session here, and we will chat with you all again in the next video. Take care.